Okay.
All right.
Now are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Very good. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Read This Book podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Duncan,
And I'm your other host, Matthew Meadows.
who likes to sing past when he should.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a personal choice. But
Yeah. I was underscoring you.
Oh, that's good. I like
Yeah.
it. It's kind of like a soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's already a song that plays.
Yeah.
It goes like, or something like that. You know the one?
Ba-dum.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably still playing, actually.
Yeah. I can hear it
yeah.
a little bit
I feel it.
in my soul.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Steven, we didn't post an episode last week. Or last time we should have.
Jeez. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. A lot going on.
Yeah, a lot going on. Busy times.
Busy times, busy people.
And you know what we realized too, though, is we wanted to consistently post episodes from January through the spring into the summer, and we did that. And we got to a point where we were both super busy, and we were like, hey, you know what? We could take a week off.
Take a week off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Because we ended up doing that several times in our first season, which was really just kind of our first year.
Yeah.
Had a couple of little breaks in there, a couple of longer gaps that we took as well. So the idea was just to be far more consistent, and for this to be our 1 week gap.
Yeah, and we'll probably do that every once in a while. Just take a week.
Yeah, and the thing is too, we're recording in what was supposed to be the release week. So there's a world in which we could have recorded earlier this week and shuffled things around, done it during the day, whatever. But it was just
sometimes life just happens, you know, and that's okay.
Yeah, it was instead of trying to cram it into a very tight window, because that's what we did with the last episode too. It was just
that was quick turnaround on that one.
Quick turnaround, because we recorded on a Tuesday
evening or Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
And then I edited that night and posted it on Wednesday morning.
Yeah. Very fast turn. You've got some time on this one.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sorry about that. We miss you guys, and we are glad to be back. Steven, you had something you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, loosely.
Yeah.
Still formulating the topic in my mind. Also, just as a preface, if I sneeze, cough, or anything like that,
we're meant
my
to put
allergies
you down.
have been. Oh yeah.
Sorry.
That would actually be potentially a relief. My allergies have been out of control.
Do you take
this
anything
spring.
for your allergies?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Curious.
For almost 2 weeks, I've been consistently taking something, and it's helped quite a bit.
Because I don't, and I just complain about it. And I just was wondering.
Mine have been bad enough that I can't avoid it at this point. For a good solid, I did a bunch of yard work in the back, and I was clearing out a bunch of brush.
Looks great, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Clearing out a bunch of brush, and just with all that, and then mowing. This was a couple weekends ago. My head felt like a brick. I could not breathe.
I hear you.
So I was like, all right, it's medicine time.
Sometimes it's just medicine time.
Sometimes it's medicine time.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I hope you get to feeling better. That sucks.
I do feel better.
Can you do me a favor?
It's just
Can you turn your head to face that way for a moment, so we can show the crowd your insane battle scar?
Yes.
From your daughter.
My child. My beloved child, whom I love, who, gave us
did not want to go to sleep.
Yeah, did not want to go to sleep. Gave us a very hard time the other night. She's 2, so that should put all the context that you as an audience need.
It looks sick though. I honestly, it looks really cool, and I kind of wish that it was permanent.
It's the best one she's given me. Yeah, it'd be interesting if it scarred. That would be something. Yeah,
you can make sure it does.
She's hitting the full-on 2-year-old thing right now, which is a absolute joy. Yeah, as we were getting ready to record, I hope she doesn't kill me for outing her like this, but my wife sent me a text that was literally she is going on a strict schedule. She only gets snacks at certain times. No TV before bed. This is not happening.
I'm actually
anymore.
also on that same schedule.
Yeah, I should be.
Yeah.
Actually, I am more so than I once was.
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
good.
Yeah, because we really
you
don't.
only have snacks at a certain time.
Yeah. No, I do snack in the evening.
Yeah.
That does occur.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I'm not consistently asking for cookies and oranges throughout the day, so I'm a little bit more disciplined than a 2-year-old.
And that's good.
Yeah, for sure.
Marginally,
in a small way. Yeah. But anyway, so the topic, the topic that we were going to talk about was like the influence of Bookstagram or Book Talk or BookTube, or basically the influence of social media on reading habits. And kind of dancing around with that and with the idea of like trendiness versus reading more established works. By established, just, they've been out for several years. They've kind of stood a little bit of the test of time and held up as like, yes, this is a good book that's been reviewed multiple times by a lot of people and holds up as something worth reading.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the topic to dance around. And some of it comes from a place of, it's both like a pro and a con. So from being on Bookstagram, I'm exposed to so many different genres and books within those genres that I just wouldn't really even have come across had I not been, connected to the people that I am on Bookstagram, right? And in some cases,
sorry, that was delayed. I zoned out completely, and I was like, wait.
He asked me a question. He needed validation.
Yeah, and that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, good.
Unless you're wrong.
Then
I'll tell you.
Absolutely freaking not. Yeah. But yeah, so
sorry, continue.
So it's almost less of a question for discussion and more of just like
anecdotally, like our experience with it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not even to come out with like a right or a wrong answer on any of this, but just kind of to suss it out.
Yeah.
'Cause I've noticed, I think some of this is just like you slow down with your reading throughout the year, I think. But I've noticed that less time since I've been on Bookstagram has gone to reading itself.
Sure.
But I have a much longer TBR. So it's almost like you're exposed to so many more books from so many people that are really great at convincing you to read stuff.
Yeah.
Or you become friends with people and they read something and enjoyed it, and it's like, oh yeah, I want to read that. It's the foundation of this podcast,
Right.
But when you have even just a few hundred people that follow you or you follow, that's already more than you can take in, And so then it becomes this thing of like, oh, well, I've seen a bunch of people reading this book.
Right.
So that one kind of rises to the top of what I might read or something like that. And so I think it's really just, how have you noticed social media influencing your reading habits?
I think that's a great question. I think that's something that you have to kind of not like wrestle with, because it's really not that big of a deal, but like something to be aware of. So for me, I've noticed that I'm reading a lot slower at the moment, and I wasn't posting on Bookstagram or TikTok, and I felt like I was doing something wrong. Like I was like not living up to this idea of like, okay, I'm a reader, so I have to be reading.
Right.
And that's an interesting thing in and of itself. But I think like Bookstagram specifically, Book Talk as well, has not only opened my eyes up to a lot more stuff, but just has made me feel like I have to be reading all the time. It's not a bad thing. Like to be clear, I don't think that's the wrong approach. I just think that for me, when I wasn't reading, and this was like a short period of time, like 2 weeks, where I was like, man, I'm kind of like slacking on this. It's almost like a value judgment to yourself of like, all right, well, do I even like books? It's like, do I even like reading?
That's actually who I am. Am I a poser?
Yeah, and so it's like, and I have a propensity to do that anyway. With stuff of just like I attach to things very quickly. And so it's like, is this even what do I even like book?
Yeah.
Do I even like book? The answer is yes, I do like book. Just so we're clear. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting because you just have this a little bit of an incentive in some cases, but also that same incentive to read and read critically and write reviews and all this stuff, the same incentive can also be a detriment when it's not working in your favor.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that's the biggest thing. I also buy so many books more books now than I used to. I've slowed down significantly on that, considering I don't have a job. And I'm going to school in the fall, so it's like you gotta kind of cut costs somewhere.
It's library time.
It's library time.
Yeah.
I've been listening to a lot of books on Libby.
Yep.
And also
I've
been in a pretty significant maybe not, because I went through a longer one last year of like just a reading slump.
Mm-hmm.
And this is so funny, and I have to tell it to the podcast. The only thing that can get me out of my reading slump is like nonfiction self-help books.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
And there really is something hilarious about that.
I know, because I don't like them.
Yeah.
Like I don't like go around like talking to people about. I even like on my Bookstagram post that I made, I was like, hey, I've read a couple books. You don't care about them. I don't care about them. They're nonfiction, like relationship, like books, or like how to 10x your life or whatever. Which I don't really subscribe to that kind of ideology a lot of times.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I am so like invested in these things at certain points in my life. I think, and it's really interesting. I think I just like because it just sounds like somebody talking, and sometimes I just like when somebody talks at me.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's why I like watch YouTube videos or like listen to podcasts. It's like I just like when people talk.
I just need to hear your opinion.
Yeah. And it's like even if I disagree with the opinion or if I don't care, it's like I just like when people talk about things.
Yeah.
And so I think for me it's just this way of like, okay, I'm reading, but I'm also just doing something I enjoy where somebody's just talking at me.
Yeah.
And it's like that's why I like school. I just like when people talk at me.
Yeah.
I like engaging in dialogue,
mm-hmm.
but I also just like to listen. And so I think that's a big part of it. Is like that's listening to a self-help audiobook seems to be the only way for me to slump bust.
Oh,
if you will.
It's been a while.
It's been a while since we've
brought
used
up the term slump buster.
Yeah, episode 11.
Was it?
Maybe.
That's probably a good guess. Honestly,
I do think that is around the time.
I hit my reading slump last year with The Bourne Identity. And at the time, like I was very much like
I think the mic caught that sound I just made.
Maybe. I'll bet it was beautiful.
Sorry.
No ASMR for free.
Yeah. DMS. We can work something out. It ain't much, but it's honest work. That's the third time we made that joke tonight. The first time on camera.
It's good. It's good.
Sorry, what were we saying?
I forgot.
Bourne Identity.
Oh, The Bourne Identity was my slump book last year. It put me into like a 6-week slump, I think, before I finished it again. And it took a work trip where I literally had nothing to do in the evenings except either watch TV and rot or like
read book.
And so I chose to read book.
And sometimes that's a difficult
watch
choice.
TV and rot.
Sometimes that's a hard choice to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just one of those things like I don't know. It's whatever.
Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. I think in regards to like the trendy versus established thing, I don't have a huge opinion on that. I think that I'm probably going to read the book anyway.
Yeah.
If a book's popular, even if I don't like it, it's probably popular for a decent reason.
Sure.
And people are going to enjoy it or they're not.
And I do think that I want to be careful how I say this. I think that sometimes you can kind of tell by the way a book is described.
Sure.
Even if someone is describing it positively, I think you can kind of tell by the description of the book whether or not it's let's say, a quality book, right? There's a difference between books where there are elements that you like and a well-written, hard-hitting book. You know what I mean?
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm probably not saying it well.
And I do unfortunately have to disagree because that's I think that's a very subjective statement.
Think? Okay.
And so that's where I would push back. I know what you're saying. I think well-written and quality are very subjective terms that I would have a hard time putting into this conversation. For me personally.
And to put a little bit of like practicality to it, with well-written, I mean like the prose is well executed. The story is laid out in a fashion that makes sense. There aren't a bunch of plot holes. And I'm not saying
sure,
like
you're technically
well written.
Okay.
Yeah, not like good or bad, but
Sure.
like technically this is a well executed piece of writing, you know? Like you can tell a bad movie from a good movie on a technical level, right? Just by the way it looks and sounds and the production quality of the film, you know what I mean? But there can still be elements within a low budget, like not well technically made movie that you really enjoy or really latch onto, or even something that really resonates with you or it speaks to you at a moment in time. So that's more what I'm referring to with well written.
Okay.
Not like a good or bad
Yeah.
valuation,
No,
but just on a technical level. Yeah, and I think some of it, like to go into the wider conversation that other people have had multiple times, like there's, you know, a lot of books that have been kind of, I would say, rushed out with the Bookstagram, Book Talk, you know, craze.
Yeah.
So I think publishers are looking for specific types of books and just shoving stuff out there as quick as possible.
Can I bring something up real quick?
Yeah.
So Brandon Sanderson, the writer of a lot of my favorite books, had this really interesting point. I don't know when he said this, but I saw a clip of it. It was about the movie industry. And the movie industry currently facing the issue that books have been facing for a really long time, which is the ability to market an unknown entity to a group. So like movies used to have the perfect way, which was previews. But now people are going to the theater less, having a harder time getting movies out into the public eye that don't have a specific like actor or thing in it. Yeah. And so like that's an interesting thing too, where the boom of social media affecting books, maybe people are the publishing industry is latching onto this really malleable media, very effective user-generated content-driven marketing strategy, and using that and which is true of all industry, probably. Just to like not, I don't know what I'm talking about generally. With
allegedly.
This stuff. Yeah. So it's just this is all conjecture. But I think like something you're saying there's validity to that. Of there's probably a bit of a push to get books out because they will do well on social media.
Right. And I think for me, like, if I had to, not that I'm really in a position to give people advice, but like if I had a small nugget of wisdom, it would be read whatever the heck you want. Like read what you enjoy, you know? Even if it's not what other people would consider quality or whatever. Like read what you want to read. It's entertainment, it's for you, right? So like that's number one. But I think if you are a reader and that's kind of part of your identity that you've chosen for yourself, I think it is best to buttress whatever genre you're into with some classics, some standouts from other genres, you know, different things like that. And you do see readers on social media doing that from time to time. They'll reach out in a post or something and be like, hey, I don't read fantasy. Where would be a good place to start? What's a good intro to that genre? I only read horror. I only read this. I only read this. And I think it's really important to read outside of your thing.
Yes, I agree.
And just be a little bit well-rounded.
That's going to play a lot into what I have to talk about tonight, into the book that I'm speaking about tonight. I also think there's an element of that's like reading diversely, just like even in like the authors that you read. It's just like people with different perspectives. Yeah. Just I think that's in the same vein of like I don't read this genre, but it's like a lot of the authors that I read are this type of person. I would like to read more of like people of color or like LGBTQ authors and like all this stuff. There's a lot of a movement for that right now. Is like reading diversely, and I think that's great because there's a lot and I've said this before on the show. It's like there's so much you can learn from people who don't live your life. Yeah. And I think that is another thing I would say is just like read outside of your bubble. Yeah. But yeah, I think then that was just to piggyback off what you were saying. Did you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. I think I'm good.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's not like there's no right answer to that at all.
Yeah.
I would say.
And I have noticed like people take some shots like at trendy stuff or which it's funny to me when people on social media take shots at trending social media stuff. And I'm like, you're trying to trend on social media.
Sure.
So there is a little bit of the pot calling the kettle black there, but yeah, I don't know. So I don't have any like shots to fire.
Yeah.
It's just more like observing this community that I've just started to dip my toe into and making some observations and even like just noting how it's affected what I'm reading, how I'm reading it, like because it is different. Like it really has changed it in a way. But I think there's and I realized I said I had nothing more to say, and here I am. But
he's saying stuff.
I think there's an age component to it as well. I do think that if I were younger than I am now, I would be a lot more swept up in the trends and trying to ride the trends and like inundated in that. Or I would be way more like vibe oriented and in what I post and like even just writing like social media trends to boost my profile or whatever. Like I would have been a lot more engaged in that earlier on. Whereas at this stage in my life, it's a lot more just like I have noticed I haven't really changed how I write about books. I haven't really changed how I give opinions about books. I'm not trying to process it in a certain way. I'm not trying to review it necessarily, because that's not my thing, and that's not really what I'm trying to do with my profile either. It's way more laid back than that, you know. And it's really not influenced by what I see other people doing either. So it really is a pretty fair representation of myself, how I approach reading, how, you know, all that kind of stuff. Not to say that younger people aren't giving fair representations of themselves, but I think, and maybe I'm going to sound like a million years old when I say this, but I do think that the younger you are, the more, the bigger the immediate things are to you.
I think you're probably right about that. I don't know if one of those things is better than the other though. You know what I mean? So it's like I would I don't know. I don't think that it's wrong either way.
Sure.
Is my thought on that. Cuz it's like
I think the only time it becomes wrong is if you kind of lose yourself in the process.
Being like disingenuous.
Yeah.
Sure.
Being disingenuous, not really representing anything that you're wanting to represent about yourself. And like, yeah, just like losing yourself along the way. You're not even enjoying what you're reading anymore.
Sure.
You're not even like,
that's I think what it comes down to, even outside of the posting aspect or like the utilization of social media. If you're just doing stuff you don't want to do, why? Are you doing that?
Or if you've
now, okay,
if you engage in social media in such a way that it robs you of what you once enjoyed.
I will say though, there is the flip side of that where reading something you don't enjoy for the knowledge of the thing is a different thing. So like I think that is totally valuable. Reading like a genre you wouldn't normally read that you don't like just so you can understand why people do like it, I think is a very valuable tool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
We probably agree. I just maybe
I said a really pointed thing. Yeah. And I think I would need to think more about that. I said a really pointed thing that we have not pre-discussed at all.
Yeah. So that's an interesting idea. I would like to come back to it at a later date.
Yeah.
To have a more we want to take a moment to talk about our sponsor, Tether. Tether is a Louisville-based software company, and we have been using Tether for quite some time now. And here's what we know. Tether has organized all of our contacts, automated our email and text marketing, and it made it significantly easier to post on social media across all of our platforms. It does a bunch of other sales stuff too for people who need that. It is at a price point that even small businesses can afford. If you want to give them a look, you can check in our bio or the description of this video or podcast, wherever you're seeing it, and give them a look. They're great people and they have a great product.
Yes.
Our other sponsor is us. We have a Patreon page, which is also in the description. Are we
recording? Yes.
No, are we like slanted?
We're okay.
I'll fix it in post. Our other maybe our other sponsor is us. Our Patreon page. Bury This Book on Patreon. If you give us $1 a month, you'll get access to a newsletter. You can send us in topics to talk about. You will get mentioned on this episode, on every episode of the show.
Yep.
By name, first name. And another thing that I am forgetting.
No, those were the things.
Were those the things?
Those are the things.
Okay.
Except that we have to now
name Jeffrey, Stephanie, Maggie, and Freddie. Thank you so much.
The best people on planet Earth.
I agree. For being our patrons. Steven?
Sir.
Who's going first?
I think you are.
I feel like I went first last time.
You might have.
But I'll go first again.
Do you want to?
I don't care.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll go first.
You may.
And I'm going to talk about this gigantic old classic here.
I wish you would.
Speaking of old books like we did. This was trendy in the late 1800s,
sure.
I think.
Naturally.
Yeah. In Russia. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm talking about today is the brothers Karamazov. And I'm going to try to keep my pronunciation of that consistent because I pronounce it like 3 different ways depending on the day and how I'm feeling. But today I think it's going to be Karamazov.
Okay. I will put a counter on the screen.
Perfect.
Anytime
that
you
would be hilarious,
say
actually,
it differently.
If you actually followed through on that and did that.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
So the
we'll
brothers,
cut that out in post so nobody knows I said that if I don't do it.
Exactly. So the brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky, the great Russian author. Some people consider this his greatest novel. Others would consider Crime and Punishment his greatest. Either way, they're both great. I haven't read Crime and Punishment yet, but 100 some odd years later, and it's still whatever. I'm assuming it
probably
is actually
fairly
great.
good.
And from reading this one, I can attest he is a fantastic writer. I'll give you the high level overview of the plot. Is essentially the story is about a family, a father and his 3 sons of varying personalities and lifestyles, right? So the youngest son, who's kind of the main protagonist of the story, I would say, Alyosha, he is training to be a monk or priest. And so he's got his biological father, but then he's also got his mentor or father, spiritual father. And that sets up one of the themes of the book, which is essentially like, which father are you going to choose?
Interesting.
And so then his other 2 brothers, one is kind of more on the agnostic, atheistic side. He's very turned off to religion, but very like analytical, scientific, rational, that kind of individual. And then the other brother, the oldest brother, is very like just sensual, romantic, in the moment, impulsive. You would probably label him as. And so they all have these very different dynamics within the family. The dad is like the town drunk, more or less, and like not a fine, upstanding person, but he's part of the community, so whatever. Everybody knows everybody type deal.
Cheers.
Like Cheers, exactly. This is essentially late 18th century Russian Cheers.
Okay, now I'm interested.
Yeah. now I'm in.
I was already in.
Yeah. So it's a long book. There are a lot of elements to it. That's the setup. And then there are a couple of different romantic interests that we start to realize are going on. Some love triangulation going on. That's very fascinating. And then the dad ends up getting murdered. Murdered. And the eldest son is accused of doing it. And so then the final book in the book is his trial.
Okay.
And they're having the arguments and they're trying to decide whether or not he's guilty.
Sure.
So that's kind of the very high level of what the book is. It goes from a very philosophical, religious, moral conversation between brothers, both fathers, all and a couple other priests in the first couple of portions into almost like a family drama, into a love story, into a murder mystery, into a crime courtroom
true
thriller.
Crime
Yeah, it literally crosses over 4 or 5 different genres throughout the course of the book, which kind of makes sense. So the way it's split up is in multiple parts and books within those parts. So almost think like Lord of the Rings, right?
I already
so
was.
there's Fellowship, book 1, book 2.
I'm always thinking Lord of the Rings.
It never stops. And
the
way
Hunt for Gollum. You seen that?
Yeah, it's coming.
Rings of Power season 2.
Let's go.
The War of the Rohirrim anime.
No, it's gonna be wild. There's a lot of good stuff coming out.
Yeah.
Hopefully, there's a lot of stuff coming out.
Okay.
We'll see if it's good.
Stuff coming out.
Yeah. But yeah, so this was actually released in a serialized format when it came out.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So they released a book at a time, and I think it's 4
Similarly
books or 5 books.
to Dickens-esque kind of writings. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was literally you got a portion of this at a time.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine reading this a month
Weren't
at a
they
time
just
or whatever.
in love? And now we're in the court? What's that about?
Yeah.
That's
or
how I imagine
having
this
to
sounding.
wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what Russian sounded like in the 1800s.
Hey guys, what's going on?
What's going on here with Fyodor?
Hey guys, what the frick?
Oh heck. But yeah, so that was how it was released. That's the general structure and plot line of the book. It's weird to try to convince someone to read what's considered one of the great novels of history, I guess. But one of the things I would say is so many of the themes and conversations and discussions that are had within the book between the characters and even some of the situations are weirdly relevant to the present day.
Time is a circle.
It truly is, and we're right back at Brothers Karamazov time. But it really is fascinating. A lot of the spiritual conversations, even one of the really famous portions of this, the Grand Inquisitor piece, which you can actually buy just that part of the book.
Oh, really?
As its own thing. They'll sell it as a standalone piece because of how it works on its own, and it's long enough as well.
That's very interesting to me.
Yeah, but it's really good, and it's basically the middle brother Ivan recounting this dream he has of the Grand Inquisitor. So think the Spanish Inquisition type deal. So the Grand
already was
okay, perfect. So the Grand Inquisitor, and then Jesus returns and has a dialogue with the Grand Inquisitor.
Interesting.
And so it's what would happen if the prominent religious leader of the time period was face to face with Jesus himself. And it's basically a discussion of how much religion became bastardized in different time periods from the original teachings of Christ. And a whole fleshing out of that whole thing, which is really fascinating because he has a pretty favorable view of how Jesus would act, even though he's agnostic and claims not to believe in God whatsoever at all. And the reason that he doesn't believe in God whatsoever at all is he basically goes on this long thing recounting all of these stories of children suffering or dying. And so it goes into this whole dialogue of, I don't I can't believe in God anymore because of evil that happens to children. That's specifically his thing. And so it goes into this whole dialogue about that people are still having today of how could an all-powerful or all-good God allow these horrible, awful things to happen. And so the two brothers have this very lengthy dialogue going back and forth about it. And the thing is, like, it's very thoughtful and thought-provoking. And at no point does Dostoevsky try to paint either of them as fools for having the beliefs and opinions that they do. There's not a... You can kind of tell where Dostoevsky lands personally, but he's respectful of the other position.
Sure.
And, like, he's fair in presenting the other position. And I think that's the thing that I enjoyed the most about this book, is not only the relevance of a lot of the themes and the points in it, but also just how well written each of the characters and their points of view are. They're all treated as equal parts of the story, equal parts of the family, equal parts of the town. There's not like, oh, this one's the fool, or this one's bad. This one's not a good person because he believes this. They actually take the time to flesh out what they think and what they believe and why. And then they come to a lot of realistic conclusions of, like, well, I guess that's where you're at and this is where I'm at, and we're just going to keep on living life now. You know? So it's not like, oh, and then there was this huge transformation and this person feels like this now. Like, people just kind of have these questions and have these discussions and are wrestling through these really difficult topics, and they just kind of have to keep going. Right? So it's not this grandiose, like, everything shifts and changes and here's the proper point of view. Amen. Really fascinating. So that almost makes it even more realistic in a lot of ways. And so I think it's the realism of it. It's the lasting relevance of the themes within it. It's how deep some of these conversations are. And sometimes that can scare people off. It gets a little bit like where am I at in the course of this philosophical discourse or whatever. That's where audio helps a lot, truthfully.
Bless you.
Thank you. The allergies, you know.
No, I know.
But those are some of the main things that I enjoyed about it the most. I was actually really surprised by how much this book grabbed me. And held my attention.
Well, we've talked about it before in just like personal conversations, and I've always wanted to read it, so I will be reading it at some point for sure. I'm definitely interested because it does sound like something that would be kind of right up my alley.
I think it would be, and even like as you've described some of the more interesting components of the last couple Sanderson books you've talked about, and how he handles religious topics and ideology, I think you would enjoy the way Dostoevsky handles it as well, just based on how you've described liking how Sanderson does it. There's a little bit of crossover there.
I'm excited to get to it, man. Do you have anything else?
I don't know that I do. I think especially like if you've ever been to therapy or have any kind of psychological like interest whatsoever, if that's like your thing in any way, which I know it is for you.
I've done both of those things. I've been to therapy and I like psychology.
This book is like a masterclass in weaving in psychological and therapeutic truths and exercises into real life like dialogue and situations. It's wild how applicable it is in those senses.
I definitely am interested. I'm on the verge of sneezing at the moment, but I'm going to attempt to not sneeze.
Sometimes you can't help it.
I did not sneeze. Take that, allergies. Sorry. Sore subject. I definitely am interested in reading it. You also have such a cool edition of it.
Yeah, this is from 1958, I think.
That's so sick.
Yeah.
That's very, very cool.
It was a great thrift books find.
Yeah, that's wild to me. Might I talk about the book I want to talk about?
I'm so ready for this whiplash to occur.
Similarly to this book, to the book Brothers Karamazov. Do you like rom-coms?
I love a rom-com.
Well, let me tell you about this book that I read that's kind of like a rom-com. It's called The People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Comparatively, a very similar book.
The structure
yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Yes. You came to this conversation with a literary masterpiece, and I'm coming to you with a very good book.
A literary masterpiece.
Yeah, that is definitely like what I would consider like fluffy romance.
Yeah.
You had mentioned something earlier. One of the main things about social media that people do is like, hey, I do not read this genre. Somebody give me recommendations for this genre. I did that for the romance genre, the light-hearted romance genre. Emily Henry was the author that was resoundingly the most mentioned.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I chose her worst book apparently to read. And I will get on. I did enjoy it, and I will get into why I think people feel like it's the worst one. I thought it was good. So essentially, the People Meet on Vacation. The premise is there is a writer. Her name is Poppy. She is a vacation writer. She began her career as a budget vacation blogger, then got hired on at this publication, and they sent her on like extravagant vacations. And she writes about them. Normally, she goes with her best friend Alex. Now, her and Alex have not seen each other in multiple years due to this event that happened to them. And she keeps referring to it as this trip that they went on where something happened. And so right from the beginning of the book, you're like, okay, that's going to be the climax of this book.
Sure.
I know it's in the past, but that's going to be the climax of this book. And it is. And so basically the structure of the book is very interesting. She has invited Alex on this trip after they have not seen each other for several years. Invited him on this trip, and I forget where they are going. Somewhere in the U.S., somewhere very like, because she was like,
Palm Springs.
Dude,
I nailed it.
I think you might be right. I actually think that you might be right.
Yes.
Hold on, I have to confirm that.
Verifying. Doop, boop, 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 boop.
I honestly feel like you might be right.
That was a complete guess.
But also you might not be right.
Well, yeah, those are the options.
That was funny. Oh, where is it? Shoot fire.
Did you type in the question?
No.
Where are they traveling and the people
Where
we meet on vacation?
do they go in the people we meet on vacation?
I wish it was a shorter title now.
Me too. Palm Springs.
I nailed it. Total guess.
I think. Because they at some point go to Palm Springs.
I think
they reconnect and take a trip together to Palm Springs.
Yeah.
After confirmation, after we confirmed Steven was correct on a wild guess, they do go to Palm Springs. I should have remembered that, but I didn't. So they go on this vacation, and the book's broken up into, okay, one chapter they're in the present, the next chapter they're in the past. This is a romantic comedy. It's very sweet. And it's maybe the most predictable book I've ever read.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because it doesn't need to be what it isn't. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to have this big, like...
Listen, a rom-com is supposed to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's not comfortable if you have no idea where it's going.
Yes.
Like, the structure is part of the appeal.
Yes. So they go, I think Alex's brother's getting married, and they're out in Palm Springs, and they used to have these trips, and they would try to do them on a budget, and then they would, like, get, what was the magazine called, like Wrestling Recreation or something, would, like, pay for all of it. And so... essentially, there's this element of they're not going to pay for this trip, but Alex doesn't know that. Poppy knows, but she wants to reconnect with him because she misses him. And they she's keeping this from him the entire time. That's fairly early on in the book that you find that out. So each chapter, like I said, kind of flip flops back and forth, and you see them, basically, to everybody else in the world, very obviously, be in love with each other. However, they're in other relationships. They are moving to different parts of the world. They're very much ships passing in the night, in a certain way, and they met in college, and he was this loser kind of guy, to her, and she was a more eccentric kind of person, and
she wasn't like other girls.
No,
yeah,
no, of course not, and he wasn't like other boys, to be fair. So it was very they had a very interesting beginning to their relationship, friendship, and then they are friends for a long time. This one event happens, and they're no longer friends. Well, not strictly no longer friends, but they don't talk anymore.
Yeah.
Can I tell you something, Steven?
Yes.
The most underwhelming thing to happen to stop being friends with your best friend. That was my biggest gripe with the book, and I think that is most people's biggest gripe with the book, is that it was so anticlimactic that it was almost like this is it. This is the reason.
Yeah.
That being said, though, I love to travel. Traveling is my favorite thing in the world. I have thought about this very specific thing, whereas we do meet a lot of people on vacation. There are people that I have met in other countries that I've talked to, and it's I wonder what they're doing. So basically, this is kind of an ode to that. In a way, it's an ode to the trips that we take, the travel that we get to embark on, and the people we meet along the way. And it's there's a quote kind of at the beginning of the book. It's well, what is that for without somebody with you? A person you care about, being with you when you do that stuff.
Yeah.
And you could argue solo travel is great. I enjoy solo traveling a lot as well. But there is something to be said with being with people you love. On these things. And so she is she can't get Alex out of her mind. She only wants to go on trips with Alex. She got this job, her dream job, but since they're not friends anymore, her life feels worse for it.
Sure.
And so it's just it's a very sweet story. Cause he's very eccentric. He has his own, his life is the way that it is, and she's very different than him, and they have this very opposites attract kind of thing going on. But throughout the book, there's these moments where they're they're almost to this point of realization that they are in love with each other, and then it fades away, and they're with other people. They have other partners that they've brought on trips, and it's this whole really awkward scenario. She hates his girlfriend, and they kind of just. I hit all my rings today. I got my stand goal, my move goal, and my exercise goal.
Yes.
I just had to tell everybody. So although the ending of the book is kind of underwhelming, I think that it is worth reading for two reasons. Very easy to read. Very much a sit down, couple sessions, palate cleanser.
Yeah.
Very easy read. The other reason I would say it's a good read is there is an element of humanity to both these characters that I think is really endearing. They live their lives. They are very much themselves. And I think that they have a really fun dynamic. The third reason that I've just made up off of the top of my head is if you do like traveling, there is an element to this too of it'll remind you of trips that you've taken. Not even so much as specifics, because it would be kind of weird if you had the same specific trips as these people. Sure. But the kind of energy around traveling, and being in the airport and seeing people in the airport and randomly running into this person who helps you do something, and then you become kind of friends with them. So there really is this wanderlust element that is really well executed in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if you're looking for something that is rom-com-y and very much just a sweet read, and this was something for me that I had not really read before. This is my first like fluffy romance. I read like romantasy, but this is my first in like the more mainstream romance genre. Yeah. I really liked it, and I'm gonna read more of her books because I do think that there is an element to them that is really, really engaging. Because everybody loves a love story. Yeah. Like I feel like there are very few people. If you don't. Yeah. Because I just think it's just fun. Yeah. And this is a really good one. Again, aside for the little bit undercooked like conflict. Yeah. But other than that, it really is engaging and fun. So I definitely would recommend it to you. Cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about it because I felt like there was something else. There are a lot of moments where Poppy, the main character, will have these realizations. And they were just really well written. Very, very emotionally intelligent, like, writing, I think. Mm-hmm. But also mixed with, like, humor. Yeah. And, like, conflict. The third act, like, conflict in a rom-com. Yeah. It's always the same kind of deal. Very predictable, very comforting, very fun. Yeah. So I definitely recommend it if you're looking for something that's easy to read. Short audiobook. Mm-hmm. I read it on my Kindle though. I used like the ebook. Couple of days maybe, less than 3 sessions probably to get through it. Also probably a great slump buster. Which if I get another one of her books on there, I will. Because I'm reading The Way of Kings. The 1,300 pages or whatever. Yeah. I'm really enjoying it, but every time I look at it, it stresses me out. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I'm reading The Way of Kings, and I'm also reading a book called Palaces for the People, and then like 2 other nonfiction books that are about relationships and also about Adlerian psychology. Cool. Yeah. I have nothing really to say about those. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book called The Soul of Shame. It's a nonfiction, like, psychology book by a psychologist, believe it or not. Wow. So just breaking down, like, what shame is, how it comes to be, how it, develops from early childhood on up, and how that, like, looks later on in life and just different stuff like that. It's very interesting. Yeah. And then
we're both on a psychology kick, it seems.
Yeah, just that one. I'm going to get back off of it soon. Okay. And then A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. Cool. It's my classic for the month. I realized I didn't have one yet this month. So
nice. You liking it?
I'm liking it a lot more than I expected to, actually. Yeah. I did not understand that it was a love story going in. I thought it was just like a World War I novel, but it's a love story set within World War I.
Interesting. You might have to convince me to read it at some point.
I may. My wife actually suggested, like, you could talk about Hemingway tonight, and you would just have to say that you haven't finished it yet. I was like, I feel like I want to finish it before I talk about it entirely.
Coincidentally, my least favorite book ever was written by Ernest Hemingway.
Well, and I remembered that you said that, so I was like, I want to be really sure that the whole thing just pops before I try to, like, convince him of something that he already disliked one book of. Yeah.
The Old Man of the Sea. It's
not my nickname.
It's not nice. It's not
That's what they called me in high school.
I knew it was kind of. It's not that bad. It's just it wasn't for me. Yeah. It's my least favorite book ever,
though. Of all the books
there's some really funny Goodreads reviews about that book too. So give that a look. See if you're curious.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
That's funny.
All right. Well. Another day, another dollar.
Another day, another dollar. And you know what they say, that the most important thing that you have, the most valuable thing that you have is not your dollar, but it's your time. And we just want to thank you for spending your time with us, especially if you've made it all the way to the end of this probably 55-minute episode.
Roundabout.
Yeah. Absolutely incredible. We're really thankful for the people that check it out. We're really thankful to all the new listeners that have been joining over the last several episodes. Thanks for coming along for the ride. If you have thoughts, comments, concerns, questions, or any kind of input for throwing things into the show, we're still a small enough show that if you give input, it
will be.
It's gonna get there in some form or fashion. Yeah. You will be responded to.
Yeah.
And probably on the show in some way.
Yeah.
Because we really do dig feedback from people. So thank you very much for supporting us, for listening to or watching the show.
Or doing both.
Or doing both at the same time. That's a whole possibility.
Yeah.
And I think with that, I think it's time to say, now this is podcasting. And all God's children said.